West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Well, the Washington Post gets it. The Washington Post understands the threat, the enormity of the threat to the United States delivered by Pennsylvania's Republican voters Tuesday night. In an editorial under the headline, "After the Pennsylvania primary, the threat to U.S. democracy rises," the Washington Post says, quote, "Republican voters overwhelmingly nominated State Senator Doug Mastriano, one of the country's most ardent deniers of the 2020 presidential election result. If Mr. Mastriano is elected in November, he could directly threaten U.S. democracy going forward." That's all it takes to destroy the absurdly fragile electoral machinery that produces a winner in American presidential elections. Just one person. That's all it takes. One breathtakingly ignorant, pathological liar. That's all it takes to end any semblance of democracy in presidential elections. Pennsylvania State Senator Doug Mastriano was at Donald Trump's January 6th rally and was seen near the grounds of the Capitol after Donald Trump told everyone to march to the Capitol and that he would march with them. After Donald Trump told them to fight like hell, Doug Mastriano was at the Capitol, at minimum, watching them fight like hell. He is under investigation by the January 6th committee. The committee subpoenaed him. He has not responded to the subpoena. And now we know that Attorney General Merrick Garland's Justice Department is conducting a criminal investigation of the same elements that the January 6th committee is investigating. And so Doug Mastriano, Republican candidate for governor in Pennsylvania, might be under federal criminal investigation right now for his attempts to overturn the presidential election. And Pennsylvania Republican voters say, that's exactly who we want in charge of the next presidential election in Pennsylvania. Now, we don't normally think of governors as being in charge of elections because they are not supposed to be. At most, in some states, a governor's signature appears on a form certifying the electoral result. The Washington Post says that Mastriano would do much more than that. Quote, "There is little doubt he would use his authority to reject free and fair election results should the voters favor a Democratic candidate. In Pennsylvania, the governor appoints the Secretary of State, and so if election liar Doug Mastriano is elected governor of Pennsylvania, he will also be the de facto Secretary of State of Pennsylvania because he will appoint a Secretary of State who will do exactly what he wants and overturn the election outcome in Pennsylvania if a Democrat wins the presidential election there. And a Republican-controlled Congress could then accept the fake electors sent by an election criminal operating as Pennsylvania's governor. None of this could be happening if we did not live under the immoral plague the founders called the Electoral College. The Electoral College is a standing crime against democracy. It never got in the way of democracy until the year 2000 because the winner of the most votes in the presidential election always turned out to be the winner of the most electoral votes in the Electoral College. Then came George W. Bush, installed as president by the Electoral College after coming in second to Al Gore with American voters. 16 years later, the same happened for Donald Trump, who came in an even more distant second to Hillary Clinton with voters. The Republican Party and Republican presidential candidates like Donald Trump have no possible plan to ever win the most votes in a presidential campaign again. They've given up on that. The only way Donald Trump can become president again is by winning the Electoral College or by stealing the Electoral College. And so Donald Trump has endorsed the Republican nominee for governor in Pennsylvania, who tried to steal the Electoral College for Donald Trump once before. Much of the democratic structure that the founders created in this country has been copied in newer democracies around the world. The one thing that no other country in the world has ever adopted is the Electoral College, because it is so obviously recognized worldwide as a crime against democracy. Each of the 50 states is a democracy. Governors are elected in a purely democratic election. So are mayors, so are United States senators. It is only in presidential elections that voters don't get their way. One Republican in Colorado now wants to institute an electoral college within the state of Colorado for the election of governor of Colorado, because Republicans see no other way to win a statewide election for governor of Colorado. No plot to steal a presidential election could work without the Electoral College. Therefore, we should obviously abolish the Electoral College, but we never will, because that requires a constitutional amendment, which requires a 2/3 vote in the House and the Senate, and that will never happen. The Washington Post is urging action on reforming the Electoral Count Act of 1887 so that it would be more difficult to steal an Electoral College victory in the states or in Congress. Senator Chris Murphy, who is working on that bill, told the Washington Post, hopefully the Pennsylvania results crystallize the coming threat. According to a new report by a group of voting rights organizations, in the first 4 months of this year, 229 bills were introduced in 33 states that would allow state legislatures to meddle in elections. The report concludes, left unchecked, these legislative proposals threaten to paralyze the smooth functioning of elections. Election administrators could be left powerless to stop voter intimidation. Election rules could devolve into a confusing and contradictory tangle, subject to change at the whims of partisan lawmakers. Election results could be endlessly called into question and subjected to never-ending destructive reviews conducted based on no responsible standard. At the extreme, election results could simply be tossed aside and the will of the people ignored. That is what the Republican nominee for governor in Pennsylvania tried to do in 2020 and will do if elected governor. If the Democratic nominee for governor in Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, is elected governor, he will appoint a Secretary of State who will do what every Pennsylvania Secretary of State has always done, follow the law, and report the honest count of votes in the election and certify the candidate with the most votes as the winner. The Washington Post says, nothing else matters. Quote, general election voters must reject candidates who, either through delusion or partisan calculation, deny valid election results. Inflation, the Ukraine war, gasoline prices, the COVID-19 pandemic, none of these issues are as important as preserving the democratic order. Americans should vote like it. Today, the Senate Rules Committee, chaired by Senator Amy Klobuchar, had a hearing on election integrity. Testifying at that hearing today were secretaries of state, election officials, and experts, including Leah Chapman, the acting Secretary of State of Pennsylvania, who will join our discussion tonight.
It is especially disturbing that some disinformation has come from those with a sworn duty to defend our democratic process. The November 2020 election in Pennsylvania, like every election since, was free, fair, and secure. Allegations of illegal activity in Pennsylvania's 2020 presidential election have been repeatedly dismissed in more than 24 federal court cases and debunked by independent fact checkers. Repeating this falsehood over and over harms our democracy and voters' confidence in our elections process.
It is Friday, the 20th of May of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Yes, of course, you know, it being Friday and Blue Moon Spirits Fridays at that, the French 77s, the virtual ones, of course, are ready for your imbibing virtual pleasure. I suppose if the world is in abject decay, you might as well have one of the most balanced cocktails in the history of cocktails to, I don't know, blunt the edges of the decay. Okay. How are you? Well, we head into the weekend with all sorts of news just dumped in our laps once again, and you know it's going to be even more. You know, I thought it was going to slow down a little bit. You know, if you remember, and who can forget, during the Trump years, you know, the weekend was, rife with all sorts of news about, well, you think you live in America? Boy, you got something coming to you, buddy. And gals. So now it really astounds me, the concerted effort by the proverbial powers that be to just dirty up Joe Biden as if he's like Hillary Clinton. I mean, it took decades to dirty up Hillary, to the point it's like, well, no one wants to have anything to do with her. Look, she's been raped, she's been pillaged, she's too dirty. It's a reminder of everything that we are capable of and have done. Oh my God. Yeah, I still do not understand. You know, it's not like Hillary Clinton went out there and cut the throats of little kids and drank their blood, but people believe that. And even on, you know, supposedly our side. Oh, I know, they don't believe that she actually cut their throats and drank their blood. I think a lot of people on our side figure that she had someone else cut the throat of a kid and then she drank the blood. So, I don't know. The brainwashing worked. It's when it was happening in the beginning, it seemed like over the top. Why are they going after Hillary Clinton? Because I guess she's a woman. Up until that point, everybody in Law and Order land said, you got to stand by your man. And as soon as the hippie stood by our man, everybody goes, no, that's wrong. How dare you? All right. So I would say let's not adopt the values of the four square dance races. Did you know that square dancing was actually brought in to white racist America to counter the influence of that darky music, jazz, and all that jigaboo dancing around? Yeah, I'm not kidding. Square dancing. I thought there was something weird about it. It just, I don't know, it didn't really feel good to be doing square dancing. Waltz, foxtrot, now that's a little bit different. But the square dance, it always felt, I don't know, a little too like raisins in a goddamn potato salad. That's what it was. Square dancing is raisins in a potato salad. You know you don't like it from the beginning. And if you do, that might say something about, well, you know what. Which reminds me, everybody asks what's happened to Elon Musk. I'll tell you what happened to Elon Musk. I actually mentioned this on social media, so I like to repeat things I put on social media. I like to try it out there. Then I put it in the show. No, now you know my secret. Anyway, everybody asks what's happened to Elon Musk. Well, I'll tell you what happened to Elon Musk. He is heir to a blood emerald apartheid fortune. He was nurtured. Okay? You could almost say groomed. There's nothing mysterious about what happened to Elon Musk. Is it Ellen or Elon? I can never figure it out. I'll just call him Musk for short. Like we all do. Okay. All right. People, well, they'll tell you what they are. You might as well believe them. Well, I'll tell you where we are. We are at the point where we're just going to cut this rant off and get into the matters at hand. And give you a rundown about what's in store for you here in this salon we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy in the Bistro Cafe part, because we have a chef's table, okay, where the amuse-bouche comes at the end. I know, it's America. We do everything backwards here. Anyway, starting off at the top, that was Lawrence breaking down how the Electoral College is a standing crime on America. Got to get rid of it. I know people will say, direct democracy will never work. Well, we're not talking about totally direct democracy, but it'd be nice if majority wins like okay. On the rest of the menu, federal contract service workers have lost hundreds of millions of dollars in pay and benefits and are at risk of losing even more because of bureaucratic fumbling. Fumbling, I like that. Incompetence might be a part of it. The GOP is willing to damage its relationship with big business to score culture war points. Yeah, what's up with that? Well, we always knew they were hypocrites, right? And the Disinformation Governance Board's ex-leader faced a torrent of online right-wing abuse that included credible threats of rape, kidnapping, and death. The part that was supposed to coordinate among DHS, the FBI, the Treasury, all of that, for when hostile foreign powers like Russia, maybe China, maybe Iran, maybe even the Saudis. Some people like to call them the Saudis. I call them the Sauds. If they're trying to, or are trying to attack our democracy, the right-wing maggots went into such an uproar over it, she quit because of, as I'll repeat, credible threats of rape, kidnapping, and death. And it wasn't just for her, but her family, her elderly parents, her friends from elementary school. After the break, we moved to the chef's table, where Secretary of State Antony Blinken accused Russia of using food as a weapon against millions around the world. And Poland said it will assist Sweden and Finland should they be attacked before obtaining NATO membership. Vlad, after round, Vlad is finding out. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page, is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page from that chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And please do become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. We need the money. I'll leave it to Tom Hartman to tell you a little bit about that a little bit here in a moment. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, please do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that and a lot more, too, so thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that posted on Twitter and other social media platforms, and you know who they are. The show notes and links, of course, are where the real reportage can be found, so find it. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, wherever fine podcasts can be found, mixed in with all the billions and billions and billions of mediocre ones like us. Well, we're exceptionally mediocre, okay? Anyway, yes, and of course you can also now find what we like to refer to as the Deep State archive of the Netroots Radio Library, starting 11 years ago. And you can find that at the Internet Archive at archive.org. Yes, sirree. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the Washington Post by Joe Davidson. Federal contract service workers have lost hundreds of millions of dollars in pay and benefits and are at risk of losing more because of bureaucratic fumbling. A new report by the government's main watchdog says poor communication among agencies, poor tracking of cases, and poor use of enforcement tools could result in cheating workers on federal projects out of even more compensation that is due under the Service Contract Act. And that's known as the SCA, the Service Contract Act. These challenges hinder its ability to effectively and efficiently enforce the SCA, increasing the chance that workers will not receive pay and benefits that they are entitled to, the Government Accountability Office told the Senate Budget Committee in a hearing earlier this month. The Labor Department enforces the law, but individual agencies oversee the work of the contractors and their companies. Under the law, most federal contracting companies are required to pay service employees, that include security guards, food workers, and maintenance staff, at least locally prevailing wages and rates and fringe benefits. Remember when Bush said, no, I'm not going to do that during a hurricane? When labor investigated more than 5,000 service contract cases from 2014 through 2019, the GAO said the department discovered violations in 68% of the cases, almost two-thirds, wouldn't you say? And that was primarily of wage and benefit protections. That led to employers across a range of service industries agreeing to pay $224 million in back wages. And that was according to the investigators. The GAO did not calculate how many companies were included in that figure, but Thomas Costa, the agency's education, workforce, and income security director, said by email that Labor's Wage and Hour Division identified just over 102,000 fringe benefit violations and nearly 85,000 prevailing wage violations across almost 2,500 employers and just over 127,000 workers. Although the 2,320 employers had violations, some of them might not have back paid wages because of bankruptcy or other reasons. I don't have to pay those back wages because of other reasons. Okay. Other reasons could be they're at the bottom of the canal somewhere. You never know. Now, there could be additional unknown violations among the $720 billion in the 2014 to 2019 federal service contracts because of various bureaucratic weaknesses. For example, the GAO said that because labor did not analyze its use of enforcement tools, it may have lacked a complete picture of the effectiveness of those enforcement strategies. And the department also has trouble enforcing the Service Contract Act because of basic communication issues. Sam Metz of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all night hawks in the diner of life. Republicans are coming out swinging against Wall Street's growing efforts to consider factors like long-term environmental risk in investment decisions, the latest indication that the GOP is willing to damage its relationship with big business to score culture war points. Do you get that? The destruction of the earth by poison is now a culture war issue. Okay, we'll go with it. Many are targeting a concept known as ESG, which stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance. Oh, like CRT. And that is a sustainable investment trend sweeping the financial world. Red state officials deride it as politically correct and woke and are trying to stop investors who contract with states from adopting it on any level. What a bunch of idiots. Good. They are putting it together with CRT, as this next paragraph shows. For right-wing activists who previously brought criticisms of critical race theory, diversity, equity, and inclusion, known as DEI, and social-emotional learning. Oh, no, you want people to be empathetic. No, we want to be able to grind their throats into the mud with our blue iron boots. Okay. And now to the forefront is the latest acronym-based source of outrage to find a home at rallies in conservative media and in legislatures. ESG has yet to take hold as mainstream political messaging, but backlash against it is gaining steam. Last week, Mike Pence attacked the concept during a speech in Houston, and the same day, he said on Twitter he planned to vote Republican. Elon Musk attacked it after Tesla lost its place on the S&P 500's ESG index. He called it a scam, weaponized, this is Elon Musk, weaponized by phony social justice warriors. Oh yeah, well, you're a blood emerald apartheid heir. The concept calls on investors to consider criteria such as environmental risk, pay equity, and how transparent companies are in their accounting practices. Oh, no wonder the right wing is against it. sites of the Associated Press brings us this final offering in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Nina Yankovitz, like so many millennials, was excited to share a social media post announcing her new job on Twitter late last month when she was named executive director for a new Disinformation Board established by the DHS. But instead of well wishes, Jankowicz's tweet set off a torrent of sexist profanities across social media and menacing emails filled with rape or death threats that continue to follow her, even after she resigned from that new job on Wednesday morning following the disastrous rollout of the program. It is a familiar scenario. A crush of online harassment, stalking, and abuse has driven dozens of women around the globe from powerful positions. The speed and unchecked virulence of the attacks show another way that social media can serve as an accelerant to sowing discord. In 2018, after winning an election that made her the first female black legislator in Vermont, Kia Morris said she was quitting the job because of racist threats, including from one Twitter user who threatened to stalk her at rallies. Former Ohio Health Director Amy Acton, one of several female health officials across the U.S. who was subjected to threats online after recommending COVID-19 masking and stay-at-home orders, resigned weeks after protesters showed up at her house armed with sexist anti-Semitic signs. Notice the Supreme Court didn't come to their aid. No, in fact, there was a law that said that those with the sexist anti-Semitic signs had every right to be there. Heidi Allen, a member of the British Parliament, stepped down in 2019, saying she was exhausted by vile online hatred she received, which included one man who posted several aerial images of her home with specific threats. He was eventually jailed for his posts. A UN report released earlier this year that looked at Finland confirmed what many of these women already suspected. Female politicians, regardless of political affiliation, are subjected to 10 times more abusive messages on Twitter, including hate speech that sometimes suggested the women kill themselves. The online abuse, the UN concluded in its report, prevents democracies from being equally representative. No wonder Ellen bought Twitter. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, so much of so little to say. First thing I want to say about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is I want to see it again. It was such a ride and was so much I don't know that I can say anything interesting after just one viewing. That said, second, although you don't need any of these things to watch Multiverse of Madness, if you've watched the Marvel movies and the TV shows and know the comics, then this Marvel film, more than others, really rewards your knowledge. Third, it's been a while since I've been so pleasantly misdirected by trailers. I thought I knew who the villain was going to be, and it turns out I was wrong. And in a way, it turns out I was right. But speaking of villains, where Marvel movies have really excelled with their villains, this movie is a refreshing change from the mass murderers with sympathetic motives, the villain formula they have worked so well. Fourth is that Sam Raimi has managed to make both a heck of a Marvel film and a Sam Raimi movie. There are just little moments like when the second monster dies in a particularly gory way. I thought, oh, there you are, Sam Raimi. Also, in a self-referential director cameo via motif kind of way, look for how many standout moments, whether plot points or comic relief, revolve around hands, or specifically touch. Fifth, when Doctor Strange came out, I feared that movie version Doctor Strange wouldn't capture the trippiness of co-creator Steve Ditko's worlds. Turns out, didn't need to fear that. Sixth, love Benedict Wong as Wong, and I love Wong as Sorcerer Supreme. Y Social Gomez como America Chavez? Sí. Seventh, what was up with all the male characters' hair? Eighth, I was pleased to see Multiverse of Madness complete an arc for Doctor Strange's character that started in Doctor Strange and continued through Spider-Man No Way Home. Ninth, on top of all that, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness has something very valuable and very Marvel-like to say, that in wake of tragedy, if we don't process and move on, but instead wallow in our grief or regret or envy or hubris, we can become not just villains, but monsters. Finally, I still want to see it again. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Emily Schwing. Oil and water, apples and oranges, fire and ice. None of these things really seem like they have much to do with one another. Or do they?
We found that more fire-favorable weather associated with declines in the Arctic sea ice during summer can increase autumn wildfires over the western United States.
Hailong Wang is an earth scientist at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory in Washington State.
So we analyzed a few decades of observations on wildfire incidents, sea ice cover, and weather conditions to identify a relationship between Arctic sea ice declining and the wildfire risks. We call it a teleconnection.
Wang says this idea of a fire and ice teleconnection, it's not new. It's a lot like the so-called butterfly effect, a term coined by meteorologist Edward Lorenz in the 1960s to explain chaos theory. The idea can be summarized like this. If a butterfly flaps its wings in one location, that could displace enough air to cause a tornado or some other large-scale atmospheric storm elsewhere.
Yeah, we certainly didn't invent this concept, but it has been in the atmospheric sciences for a long time. So because of the connections within the Earth system, especially in the atmosphere, one small change in one region could affect other regions through the atmospheric circulation.
Connections between declining sea ice and wildfire weather have been made before. Wang says previous findings have relied heavily on statistical relationships.
For example, they find that Arctic sea ice are declining in many years, and they also found increase in extreme weather like wildfires in the western U.S.
But they couldn't explain the cause and effect. So Wang and colleagues took those known statistical relationships one step further. The team applied them to a state-of-the-art climate model with wildfire prediction capabilities.
In that way, we were able to identify the response of the climate system, including the fire weather over the western U.S. and other responses to the Arctic sea ice.
What they found is a tale of two vortices.
So when the summer sea ice is much reduced, ocean can absorb and store more heat from sunlight. Less sea ice cover over the Arctic will allow more heat also to be released from the ocean to the atmosphere in the following autumn and early winter. Otherwise, the sea ice can insulate the heat from the ocean to the air.
So more heat's released to the atmosphere as the sea ice declines.
The anomalous heat in the Arctic can form rising air from the surface, and that can strengthen the low pressure system, which is one of the spinning vortex. It's counterclockwise.
This forms a low pressure system, and Wang says when it moves south, it pushes the polar jet stream off its normal course and forms a second vortex.
So this shift also facilitates the formation of a high pressure system over the western U.S. This high pressure system is a clockwise spinning vortex. This drives dry and hot air to descend to the ground from the upper air to the ground. Normally comes with clear skies and no precipitation. So those are all favorable weather conditions for wildfire hazards.
The findings are published in Nature Communications, and Wang says wildfire might not be the only result of declining sea ice.
The Arctic changes could also be connected to extreme cold weather.
Like the infamous 2021 Texas ice and snowstorm that knocked out power to millions and caused billions of dollars in damage. Wang says looking for more teleconnections is where his research will go next.
So moving forward, we like to explore more connections of Arctic changes to extreme weather, climate change over other regions of the entire globe along that direction.
If wildfires and sea ice could be this climatically entwined, surely there are other climate surprises just waiting to be unraveled. For 60 Second Science, I'm Emily Schwing.
This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. After a storm or disaster, it's important to eat only safe food. Throw away perishables like meat, poultry, fish, eggs, and leftovers stored above 40 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 hours or more. Throw away food with an unusual odor, color, or texture. Throw away food that may have come in contact with floodwater, including food in swollen, punctured, and damaged cans. When in doubt, throw it out.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
When Supreme Court member Sam Alito's secret plan for canceling the constitutional right of women to end their pregnancies leaked out to the public, Republican politicos went ballistic. Over the leak, that is. The court's Republican Chief Justice John Roberts called the unauthorized disclosure, quote, an affront to the majesty of the Supremes. Likewise, Republican congressional leaders have furiously demanded to know who done it and why. Way beyond the political screeching and posturing, however, a Pennsylvania woman quietly wrote a letter to the New York Times that calmly posed a couple of honest, more fundamental questions. Why are Supreme Court votes and processes so hidden in the first place? And how did this grip on secrecy become so sacrosanct? After all, as important and enormously powerful as this tiny judicial body is, it's still a governmental agency doing public business that affects every American. So the legal work that the 9 members of this ultimate judicial authority do, including their internal machinations to reach such awesome decisions as nullifying fundamental human rights, ought to be transparent to all who will be affected. The ugly truth is that today's third branch of government has needlessly, dangerously, and rather ludicrously become a black-robed autocracy. Bear in mind that these 9 individuals are enrobed for life, make up their own rules of ethical conduct, operate almost entirely behind closed doors, and the bare majority of only 5 of them can arbitrarily overrule presidents, congresses, states, other courts, voters, and your own personal life decisions. This is Jim Hightower saying, and now comes a GOP majority of Supreme Justices determined to entrench corporate plutocracy, right-wing theocracy, and Republican sovereignty over all of us. That's why we must finally lift the medieval level of secrecy the partisan judges are using to shroud their actions. Howdy-ho, folks. Thanks for tuning in and sharing my weekly commentaries. Also, please join me for a live web show I host every other Tuesday, the Hightower Lowdown Happy Hour at the Chat and Chew Cafe. You can join the action live online as I chat with grassroots leaders and progressive sparklies from around the country. Go to hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew to find out about upcoming guests and watch past episodes. That's hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew.
You are listening to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. Many of the American founders gave their first loyalty to their home states. From the very beginning of the Revolution, however, George Washington was a nationalist. His country was America, not Virginia, and what America could become through a strong union of the states. Later, as president, he would declare that Americans as citizens by birth or choice must always exalt the just pride of patriotism more than any appellation derived from local discriminations. In 1787, Washington's concerns about the disintegration of the nation prompted him to serve as a delegate to the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. He was convinced of the need for a strong national government. Washington presided over the convention, and his support was key to ratification of the newly proposed Constitution. He spoke rarely during the debates, in part because he was the presiding officer. That's all for today's podcast. The show's theme song is Complacent by Cheryl B. Englehart. You can find Cheryl online at cbemusic.com. 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
If and when the Supreme Court reverses Roe, who will suffer? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. And the list of who will suffer is a long list. That includes victims of rape, victims of incest, victims of domestic violence, teenagers, low-income workers, women of color, immigrants without documents, really all members of marginalized groups. In contrast, for the wealthy, the right to choose will, for the most part, remain relatively intact. They will be able to access that health care. They will have the wherewithal to travel. That's obviously not the case for women who literally can't afford to miss work, for single moms who can't leave their kids, for women who don't have money to travel and live in a state that has criminalized buying abortion pills. What are they to do? Studies show that women unable to access abortion disproportionately are women of color, who, denied an abortion, are much more likely to live in poverty, be unemployed, and be unable to escape violent male partners. In addition, a nationwide abortion ban, one study shows, would increase pregnancy-related deaths by 21%, 33% among black women, who already are 2.5 times more likely to die in childbirth than white women. Which means that overruling Roe may well initiate a death spiral for women, as well as a potential death spiral for constitutional rights. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1926. That was the day President Calvin Coolidge signed the Railway Labor Act. For decades, railroad labor disputes had often become bloody affairs. The railroad companies hired gunmen who killed dozens of strikers in 1877. The strike was so violent it became known as the Great Upheaval. In Scranton, Pennsylvania, for example, hired guns shot into an unarmed crowd of strikers. 3 innocent people were killed. In 1894, the Pullman strike had paralyzed interstate commerce and ended with violent repression by federal troops. Starting in 1888, the federal government passed a series of acts aimed at stopping these bloody battles. Then, during World War I, railroad operations came under government control. Labor disputes were sent to a national board of adjustment during the war. This all laid the groundwork for the Railway Labor Act. The goal was to find a better way to resolve railroad labor management disputes. Representatives from the railroad companies and the unions participated in drafting the act. It called for a system of mediation for railroad labor contracts, and only after the mediation had been exhausted could the parties attempt other means, such as strikes or lockouts. Most significantly, it recognized the right for railroad workers to unionize. Under the Act, employers can hire replacement workers during a strike, but they must take back the striking workers when the strike is over. For an industry that has had a notorious history for firing those who even hinted at a strike, this was an important change. In 1936, the Act was extended to include airline workers. The Act is considered an important step toward the creation of the National Labor Relations Act.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America. Let's make that clear. Where it is currently, I got to tell you, 38 degrees, and we are under a frost warning. I did cover, actually what I did is I haven't really put plants in the ground yet, though things are blooming gloriously. But I did put the new tomato plants and a climbing rose in the greenhouse and shut it in. Just to be on the safe side, now these temperatures are forecast at a couple hundred feet above where the mothership in Rogue River proper is. So we're a tad warmer. As I just look at the outside temperature gauge, it looks like right here at the mothership we're bumping 40 right now. So we will be a bit warmer than we were yesterday. It only got to about the low 60s. And we should be in the low 70s today. Winds out of the north at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies overnight with lows near, or actually lows in the low 40s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10. And then abundant sunshine Saturday and Sunday with highs around 75 to 80. Winds out of the north at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon have increased and now stand at 437 and 52. And our deceased have increased by a couple and now stand at 537 lost souls. Grass pollen is very high right outside the window here in Rogue River. Ouch! The air quality index is good at 28 parts per million, and as I mentioned before, they're going to burn trash because the air is so good. And the daytime UV index is high at level 6, so do take care if you see a number even close to that. Not even close. Take care with your skin. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.24 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 80%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London, for instance, is 62 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 66 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 81 and fair, and you would expect that. Kyiv is 73 and cloudy. Good for them. Kabul is 64 and clear. Well, we don't have to worry because we're not there anymore, are we? Hong Kong is 78 and fair. Tokyo is 68 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 56 with a light rain. San Francisco, California is 56 and sunny. And New York is 70 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world. Brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Michelle Nichols of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. In this article, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken accused Russia of using food as a weapon in Ukraine by holding hostage supplies for not just Ukrainians, but also millions around the world. A senior official in Moscow later rejected the allegations, saying Russians were not idiots and would not export food while being subject to tough sanctions. That's not what he means, you idiot. Addressing the UN Security Council, Blinken appealed to Russia to stop blockading Ukrainian ports. The Russian government seems to think that using food as a weapon will accomplish what its invasion has not, to break the spirit of the Ukrainian people. The food supply for millions of Ukrainians and millions more around the world has quite literally been held hostage. The war in Ukraine has caused global prices for grains, cooking oils, fuel, and fertilizer to soar. Russia and Ukraine together account for nearly a third of global wheat supplies. Ukraine is also a major exporter of corn, barley, sunflower oil, and rapeseed oil, while Russia and Belarus, which has backed Moscow in its war in Ukraine, account for more than 40% of global exports of potash, a crop nutrient.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Anonymous staff at Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Poland will assist Sweden and Finland should they be attacked before obtaining NATO membership, the Polish Prime Minister said. I consider the ascension of Sweden and Finland to NATO as an important signal of strengthening security in Europe. I want to make it clear that in the event of an attack on Sweden or Finland during their accession, or the process, Poland will come to their aid, the Prime Minister reiterated. Finland and Sweden formally applied to join the NATO alliance on Wednesday, a decision spurred by Russia's invasion of Ukraine and setting in motion a process that is expected to take only a few weeks. Indeed. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Cohen. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie d'un novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon